I'm getting so old. I can't see anything. I need LASIK so bad, y'all. Recorded live from... Why do you give me all these hard, big words, yo? I do not like that.
That might be our cold open right there.
If you really want to, that's fine. All right. Recorded live from the apotheosis of our hero's journey, it's our Roll for Joycast, where we quest in order to play our way to a world of holy wholeness.
I'm your host, your Dungeon Master Pastor, Rory.
And I'm your host, Trin, your Jewish spiritual storytelling baby therapist companion.
Today is episode 2, where we welcome our special guest, Reverend Alex Smith, to join us in talking about character creation and role play in tabletop role-playing games, and how we can navigate the nuances of identity, like gender, sexuality, and our stories, and all that good stuff.
But first, let's roll for initiative and meet the players at the table.
All right, so everybody roll your d20.
First roll again.
Oh, I got a 3.
10.
16.
All right, you're first. The question is, who is your favorite hero that shares your gender, and who is your favorite hero that is a gender different than your own? But first, introduce yourself.
Oh my gosh, what a question. But also a great way to introduce myself. So my name is Pastor Alex Smith. You can just call me Alex. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a pastor in the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, that's the ELCA, and I'm serving in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I'm also a genderqueer, non-binary person. So I love that we're talking about playing with gender and thinking about identity and the ways that that intersects with gameplay today. I think it's going to be really fun. And if I think about heroes that share my gender, that's kind of difficult. I don't specifically see those characters. And it's part of why I've always been drawn to, like creatures more than people. If I'm thinking about putting together a character, I'm going to pick a dragonborn before I pick a human, because there aren't a lot of heroes that look like me. But in general, I really like the big beefies with a heart of gold. So I really like Scorpia from She-Ra. There's a mask character who is just, beautiful, beautiful heart. And Garza Borelios from Star Wars Rebels. Also a little bit rough around the edges, but a big sweetie, will do anything to protect his family. So that's gender.
Zeb. I named my car after Zeb.
I love that.
All right, Trin, you were next. What's your favorite hero that shares your gender? And a hero that has a different one.
This one's hard. Because I think I share Alex's sentiments of like, there aren't a lot that are like me. So, I'm sorry. I'm going to be really lame. And I think a TV show character that I super connect with is David from Schitt's Creek. Really like him. I think gender-wise, they never really talk a lot about that during the show, but I just felt like he really rang true with me and also my sexuality, and that was kind of the first time I saw someone that in TV or anywhere that like I could like relate with in a more real way. So I don't really have a superhero.
You don't need a superhero. Just any main character.
Yeah, that's my character.
All right. Do you have another?
Do I have another? When I was young, I really liked Wonder Woman, but I hated the fact that she was like overly sexualized and feminized. But I liked the idea of like strength in a female body. But and I think that was kind of the first time I like got my wheels turning, I think, as a kid, because I never felt like I fit in, and I didn't, which was fine. So I think that's going to be kind of like my difficult answer. Like they got me thinking, but I also think they could do a better job presenting that character and would love to see a different version. But yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, I had the low roll of a 3. So for me, my favorite hero right now that shares the gender, I identify he him, and my favorite at the moment is red-haired Shanks from One Piece, who is this bit character. Doesn't occupy the main party, but plays like a role over the whole story, as like the almost like this father figure that the main character is looking up to. And lately, with my kids, I've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, just playing the role of that father figure and trying to pass the torch, but also be like a good example and an example that they really want to follow, is really awesome. Also, Shanks is a badass. He gets his arm bit off trying to save this kid and is just like,
Oh.
it's just an arm. Don't worry about it. It's just an arm. I have another one. And he's fine. Like, he still ends up being like one of the most powerful people on the whole, like the most powerful pirate on the whole ocean. So
Oh my gosh.
Shanks is the shit. And I was just watching an episode last night where he was quoted as saying, if the road to what you want is too easy, then you're on the wrong road. And that is so much my identity. Like, it has to be hard for it to matter. And so that's me. Also, I love, for a hero with a different gender, I love Adora from She-Ra. So,
Yeah,
Alex,
she's good.
you and I both with the She-Ra picks. But,
Yeah.
yeah, Adora is great. I love that she's kind of ditzy and just loves her friends, and has, like, this very friendly, caring about people outside, but then, like, if you cross her, then prepare to get your shit rocked. So
Yeah.
I
She's like a sweetheart jock. I love that.
she is a sweetheart. She is a sweetheart. So that's it for our intro. Now let's get over to our main topic. So the main topic for today, we're talking about character creation and role play in tabletop role-playing games and how we can use our characters to navigate the nuances of identity, like gender and sexuality, our stories in all sorts of ways.
Society wants to put us in boxes, whether those boxes are gender, sexuality, faith, practice, etc. So I just think this is a wildly interesting idea because I was telling Alex earlier that I'm allergic to boxes. And I think my whole life has kind of played that out, that every time I have had to be in a box. I used to be a pastor, and I think there was just a lot of boxes people tried to put me in because I'm in a female body, whatever. But people would expect things from me because they would assume my gender is female. And that got me into a lot of conflict and just was not comfortable. But I've wrestled with this idea of boxes, and even faith-wise, like I was a pastor, and while I was a lead pastor, I converted to Judaism. So probably not as popular with some people, but that was just where my faith had led me. And it led me there because there was an openness where I didn't have to be in a box. And it was just where my heart really connected with faith. And I loved that I was wanted to provide more open space to hold other folks, not in boxes. Like wherever you connect with God, wherever you connect with yourself, wherever you connect with faith, your sexuality, those are good things, and they don't have to be the same. And I think boxes separate us, rather, that can separate us if we're too stingent in it, rather than enjoying the beauty of difference and different expressions. It'd be boring if we had too much of the same. So that's my personal example of boxes, that faith can ebb and flow. Sexuality is complex. Faith journeys can be very complex and moving. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, as someone who occupies really like the majority or the powerful identities on the scale of like social power as someone who's white and male and straight and all those things. My identity has been something that for my childhood just was kind of, I didn't think about it in those terms. I didn't think about necessarily the boxes because every box was made to fit me. And I found myself like very comfortable moving in lots of different spaces. And but as I've kind of become more aware about of other people's experiences of the world, it's been something that I've wrestled with and had to learn a lot and identify a lot of the ways where there's a story in my head of I've got important things to say, and I've got right answers, and I've got great ideas. And sometimes I do, but sometimes it's just society like encouraging me to talk because I'm a dude. And it actually does a lot of good for me to shut up sometimes. And listen.
It's good for human beings, but I think the self-reflection's really healthy, Rory.
Yeah.
I can resonate with some of the things that Trin said. We're in the unique environment of having multiple people who understand this non-binary genderqueer life on the pod. So that's really fun. But yeah, another one for me is being like a neurodivergent person. So I'm an adult on the autism spectrum, and growing up, I really didn't have very much language for some of the ways I was different from my peers, like the way that I was processing information, or the way that I wanted to pay attention, or sensory things like, oh, the lights hurt. If you say that to your buddies, the lights hurt, they're like, okay, what's wrong with Alex? And that kind of becomes the thing if we are in a society of boxes, when you start going, what's wrong with Alex, instead about being like, how are we uniquely and fearfully and wonderfully and beautifully made, which we're going to get into later in the pod. But yeah, I think when we can start to look at some of these boxes and we can see sometimes they help with clarity. I know it was really awesome for me to put language on being on the spectrum when I was older and be like, oh, hey, I'm not alone. I'm kind of part of this cool community. That was really helpful. But language about being someone, like being a trans person born in a female body, like sometimes the expectations of what it means to be trans masc. Oh man, from clothing to behavior to like who you date, who you marry, it can get so rigid just in a different way. So it's really interesting. As people, we really want to sort things out. We really want to get clarity about the situation. And sometimes it's really helpful, and sometimes it's hurtful and it's challenging. So an awareness of that pattern that we have and figuring out when to use our organizing and categorizing, I think is really very, very useful.
Yeah, I like what you said about how it was really helpful for you to claim that language and find that language, defining that for yourself. But it's when we use that language to start defining other people, or for other people to start defining us, that's where it seems to be the tough point.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, I think about, I don't know if any of y'all heard this, but it's still all the time confirmation. The teachers will be like, I need some big, strong guys to come move chairs. And I'm like 6'1", more than 300 pounds, just kind of like a big buff person. So I'm like, excuse me, I'm not invited to help carry chairs.
I can move a chair.
How very rude. I'm going to carry two because you told me I can't, So, yeah, I mean, it's all over the things that we don't really think about, right?
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that like when I interact with people, and I resonate with so much of what Alex said, because I am too part of the neurodiverse community, and I definitely process differently. I have ADHD. I can't sit still, and I think about like 80 things at once. It's fine. Like this.
Yeah.
And I'm raising 2 children that are neurodiverse, and watching them like have to interact with the world and watching them in relationship with other people going, you think about it like that, or you do it like that. It's just weird. But this like thought of, I'm going to do my best to put this into words, because I've been thinking about this for a while, on this notion that people have to like fit you into a box to understand you. So that like when you meet somebody, or there's like this, okay, I need to get this information about you to classify you to then know how to interact with you. And I always thought that was interesting. Like, it seems like this is happening. Like, you're trying to figure out all these different things about me to put me somewhere so that you know how to interact with me. I don't know if that makes any sense. But
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I find that fascinating. And also a lot of times ick, because a lot of those boxes tend to be very wrong. And then just looking at like how that like people interact with each other and how they're trying to understand one another as we move through this world, and how might we, instead of trying to like put people in our boxes before we really ask the right questions or get to know people, or how do we create like this open pot of, I'm just going to hold you as a complex person, and I'm going to ask the questions, and I'm going to let you identify you instead of me having to identify you in order to know how to interact with you.
Absolutely.
If that makes any sense.
Oh, totally. Totally. And I think about the danger, I think the risk factor, if we start putting people into boxes, is the same thing that happens with race, with things like white supremacy. It's when we say, this is most supreme, this is the best box, this box goes on top. So, you know, men are the best, put that box on top, and all the other boxes crushed beneath. Or white people, hey, that's the race box you want, all the other boxes crushed beneath. So, I mean, the risk factor is when we start to sort these things out and be like, yep, now I've got your information, and I'm going to show you exactly where you belong. And wow, I don't think we should be able to decide that about one another.
No. And as a mixed person myself, like when that conversation comes up, where do I go? Like, I don't fit into a
Absolutely.
box. I am complex even in my makeup, and I didn't get to choose that. But
Right.
so I'm a
Right.
mixed person. I'm a person of color. I also have, white heritage from many different places in my family. But my lived experience in this world is as a minority, because that's what box people put me in, and they don't bother to, it like comes out later. Oh, you're multiracial. Yeah, I am. And then they're like, oh. But then there's like, when they find that out, then there's like, as a multiracial person, as a mixed person, there's like this feeling of homelessness, because I don't get to fit into the boxes because there's no box for me. And I think the more the world gets polarized, the more uncomfortable it gets for those of us who are like, okay, well, is there a box for the misfit toys? Should I go to that island?
Totally.
Like,
Totally.
I mean, and then it's like and then the intersectionality of like, I'm queer, I'm a person of color, faith-wise, it's just like all those intersectionalities, and I'm like, wow, where's the crappiest box? Because apparently I deserve to be there.
Yeah, or when people are like, which one is the most important box?
Oh, yeah.
It's like, dude, these are pieces of who I am.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, this is a tapestry, and you are more than what you may reduce yourself to as well. So like, it's odd thing, you guys.
Yeah. And so playing games, role-playing games, allows us to explore parts of our identity and break apart those boxes. But it hasn't always, and it doesn't always. And in fact, in the earliest versions of Dungeons and Dragons, Gary Gygax, who was a bit of a like bioessentialist, wrote into the rules restrictions about ability scores for men and women, and that men and women would never be like as strong as one another. That was just a thing, or that if you were a different race or species, that your abilities would skew differently one way or the other, because you are a certain race, then your biology is determined to be a certain way. So like in the advanced Dungeons and Dragons, like first edition D&D, if you were a dwarf, you had lower charisma, because nobody likes dwarves. I guess they're stinky. If you were an elf, you had lower constitution because they're weak and flimsy. Or if you were a gnome, you were not wise because you did stupid things. And if you were a halfling, you had low strength because you're a little person and therefore can't be strong. And If you were a man, you could have strength all the way to the top, plus 100. If you're a woman, your strength was capped, and you could only progress so far. So like the maximum strength for a female elf character was only 16.
Wow.
Jeez.
Wow.
What?
And
My drow paladin would have something to say about that.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
And they have a whole like second chart where they break down like the different scores for men and women across the races, and the only thing that's ever different is strength. It's like the whole thing is just to say women are less strong than men, and strength was one of the most important attributes in early D&D because it affected how you attacked and how you struck things, and so that got baked into the game, and that sort of like male superiority was baked into the culture of table play for a long time. And
honestly, I'm kind of surprised that it doesn't have lower intelligence stats for female as well. Like given
given the rest of the crap. Why?
Woo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like ugh.
Yeah, so luckily those restrictions, they didn't last long. By the time second edition AD&D came around, the male-female gender restrictions were thrown out the window because the next designers realized, okay, this was dumb. But there was still caps on like how far you could progress in different classes if you were of varying races. So like elves could be great wizards, but a dwarf would never be as great of a wizard as an elf, just because it didn't fit the racial story that they were trying to put out and tell themselves, which was what they did, and it was part of what society has done. It's just like a reflection back of how society has, as Alex, you said, put one category on the top and said, okay, this category is like the supreme category, and then all the other categories underneath, and required like there to be this ideal version of what it means to be a hero, what it means to be
main character.
A main character. And when you do that, what we end up with is this sexist, racist, patriarchal hegemony that we're still fighting against and trying to break down, but it is this really kind of shitty real life thing. I don't know, like, as newer players of the game, I wonder if either of you have you experienced any hangovers of that in your play, or is it just like not at my table? I haven't had that experience.
Oh, for sure. So like I got into DMing pretty quick after playing. I just really enjoy being a game master. And one of the things I love is teaching new players how to play the game. I actually use that Superlight system that you put together, Rory, which is pretty sweet. And I love teaching new players how to treat each other. And some different players across the tabletop role-playing community have put together safety tools that you go over like every time you're going to play a game. And some of them have specific like pause and fast forward and rewind, but a lot of them have to do with humane ways of treating each other and how to interrupt that when we're not and how to move past it. And so one of the places I'm a DM is Transformation Project. It's a local LGBTQ plus community center here in Sioux Falls, and I play with a lot of new players. And every once in a while, we have people drop in, and they like think they're an ally.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But they are not, right? And they come. It's usually like a cis white male toxic dude, and he'll show up at the table and just like be really shitty to everybody, try to assume everybody is stupid, assume everybody doesn't know how to play, assume everybody doesn't know how to do math, assume everybody needs a lesson on the history of D&D, the history of the world, and usually will try to take over my role as the game master. And so it is such an art of showing other people how to say no to that kind of behavior, like how to be direct and firm and just like shut that down, and in a loving way too, and be like, oh yeah, this person has been here several times, they know exactly what's going on, I'm gonna ask you to be quiet while they finish talking about their character. Like
Yeah.
Sometimes you actually have to do that, but I wish.
Yeah, that's
I
one of
wish it
those
wasn't as
unwritten
often.
roles of the dungeon master, is like setting a table culture and like
Yeah.
helping people be good together around the table.
Yeah, by the time this comes out, I will have been at Gen Con with Rory and a couple of our other buddies. And one of the things I'm excited about is going into the game with people I know and trust. Because I don't play D&D with people I don't know and trust. Because I do not want to deal with all of the shit that happens. The language, the assumptions. Yeah, none of it. So I really carefully cultivate by controlling the game as the game master or being very choosy about who I play with.
I resonate with you hard, Alex. I'm not a game master, but in many of my table games, even with friends, we've actually like had some conflict of like, how do we treat each other, and if somebody gets uncomfortable or whatever. So we have like a card system. We use red, yellow, green cards, and we can
Nice.
play those at any time. And yellow, we pause and we talk about it and we redirect. And red is like, nope, we're going to stop right here and we're going to go in a different direction. And we're going to share
Nice.
why that is with somebody, because I think the main thing in our games, and I'm with you, I only play with people that I know and love, like trust. And I do this thing where I meet new people and I find out they're in D&D and I'm getting to know them. But I'm like, I can D&D date you. We can do
Yeah, for
like, we can D&D date, and we can do like a short, like little, like one-off
one
game,
shot.
one
Yeah,
shot, and then we can decide if we can jam together,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
because I don't know, it matters. And I do think, and I hadn't really thought about it until like you started talking, and I was like, oh yeah. But I do think a lot of it is because of the stupid shit that comes out of people's mouths that I may not know, that is gender loaded, racist, and that I just don't want to sit at the table with. And so for me, it's about, I'll D&D date you to see if you're safe. And if you're not safe, I'm out, because I'm not going to put myself through that, nor anyone else at the table, because that's not my issue. That's your issue. But yeah, like, and there's been some definite, like, I noticed like in the game playing, I kind of see the wrestle with myself in the world. I see it from a different perspective. And weirdly enough, I never pick a white character to
Yeah.
play. And I think it's just because when I'm playing the game, I think I can't escape my minority experience in the world. And yeah, and I just think that has like some, I haven't realized this before now, but has some connotations of why I form the characters that I form and play, and how I play and why I play the way that I do. And I definitely have done gender exploration in games where,
Totally.
and
Totally.
yeah, and like sexuality exploration, and like, oh, I'm going to be this, and I'm going to see what it feels like to be this. So I just think there's so many valuable things that you can play, like do in the game and discover and wrestle with, but also like people can do some harm as well.
Absolutely. And I think there's some just basic like human 101. So one of the things is like teaching people the script of not talking over each other, teaching people the script of allowing shared time. And unfortunately, especially if you grew up in boxes that felt really comfy for you and you had all this room and you could go into everyone else's boxes, you're not as aware of that kind of thing. And so typically it's like this is at white guys that I'm helping check and redirect and be like, and now it's Julia's turn. So some of it is just setting the basic manners of the table rules, and then hopefully that leads to more humane treatment in how we like think about each other as human beings, as complex human beings that God made and loves.
And that's really, so I've been doing some reading over the summer on my sabbatical, which has been glorious, but we'll not get into that here. But I've been doing some reading on the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell wrote this book, Hero of a Thousand Faces, talking about kind of looking at stories, mythological, legendary stories, religious stories told around the world, and formatting them into kind of this loose structure of a hero's journey, acknowledging there's some big areas of variability, but at the crux of that journey, at like the apotheosis, that lovely big word that we had at the front, the apotheosis, the point of like return, the point of like I've come to gain my ultimate boon, there's finally this revelation that the hero comes to. And the revelation in so many stories that are told is that the boxes, the binaries of life, they all just start to fall away. And it really goes in this non-dualist place to experience like the wholeness of reality and the wholeness of the hero as a whole person themselves. I got to go to Tibet when I was in college and visit the Patala Palace. And in the Patala Palace, there was something that I didn't expect to see, which was these statues of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas having crazy sex with their gender counterparts, which was wild.
It's truly the would you do your clone situation.
Yeah, it was like, and I did not quite get it, but I read this book, and at the moment I was like a college kid. I was like, those statues are having sex with one another. That's wild. And I didn't understand what was going on there, symbolically or religiously, or why that was in the palace. Like, and people were putting like offerings at the feet of them. But Joseph Campbell talks about those images actually, and says that in this, it's talking about this point of the journey, like the point of the journey, the thing that you discover, which is to say that the two are the same, that each is both, and that the dual form is only an effect of illusion, and that this is a supreme statement of the great paradox by which the wall of the pairs of opposites is shattered, and the candidate is admitted to the vision of God. And that's a quote from Joseph Campbell. And it's just this point where, you know, reality is so much bigger than the boxes. And each of us is so much bigger. And that society's been putting people into boxes for a long time, male and female. But in a lot of, especially traditional societies, you see like the spiritual leaders or the spiritual prophets are people who occupy spaces that don't easily fit into the boxes. The prophet Daniel in scripture was a eunuch, and was not occupied this like third gender that was there. Joseph with the amazing coat. The thing about that coat, it's only mentioned one other place in scripture, and that's as a garment that the king's daughters wore. So it was like this feminine clothing that he loved to dress in, and his father, these long flowing robes, that was the clothing of women. And yet Joseph goes on to be this great leader, and they're occupying these interesting spaces that are outside the boxes.
I'm so compelled as a Christian person who is very much informed by Jewish professors who have taught me to do midrash with the text. And you take it and you turn it over and over and over, and you say, what is the possible different angle that I could be looking at this scripture from? I love the different things that we can learn here. And there are some different pieces of scripture that really speak to me about, well, I think in particular about God, and that have really been exciting for me as a queer person, as a non-binary person, especially in the creation stories in Genesis, when God is speaking as the triune, but they're using like they, them pronouns, both as plural and as non-gendered. I'm always like, ooh, what does it mean to be made with the gender identity of God? Non-binary. That's pretty cool. Or you mentioned this story, like the Ethiopian eunuch. That's a really beloved one for a lot of people in the queer community because it's God specifically calling and speaking to and welcoming someone who is outside of the binaries of what is expected in the day, what is insider and what is outsider, and saying like, you, yes, you're part of my family. Speak the word, do the good. You belong here. But I'm especially compelled by like the image of Jesus post-resurrection. I remember seeing some art. Actually, Rory, I think you had shared it on your blog at one point too. Some art that some trans folks had made about Jesus's resurrection return and how he is sort of moved beyond some of the binaries of what it means to be human. And Jesus comes and walks among people, and they're not totally sure if it's Jesus. Like, is it a ghost? Is it the gardener? But there's something really incredible and divine about his presence, or about their presence in that moment, after encountering the divine, that I find to be like very boundary breaking, very outside of the binary of that male-female divide, the human divine divide. Mm-hmm. There's so many exciting ways specifically that I feel like the incarnation can get into that for people who are excited about Jesus.
Yeah. So we have these
where my mind goes.
These like faith convictions, and maybe this will be a good segue into our game design theopoetics segment, where we take our convictions and weave them into our gameplay and how we think about playing the game and playing characters in the game. Because our conviction is that God made us, that each of us is fearfully and wonderfully made, like it says in Psalm 139, and that the God who made us in their image is the God who says, let us make humans in our image, according to our likeness. That's how it is, that pluralistic God in Genesis 1. And each of us is holy and sacred with an identity that's more expansive and unique than any box could ever put us in.
I think something interesting here is I'm gonna Jewish out here for a second.
Please do.
I think one of the tough things in Scripture is, like, if we're made in the image of God, that means God is genderful, full of different expressions and types of gender. And there were decisions made in translating the English version of the Bible that were made that are not congruent with what Hebrew actually says. And we can have the argument that, yes, it was written in, Semaic, and their sister languages. Okay. So the thing is in Hebrew, a lot in Scripture, if you read it in the original language, they use this word called who to identify God. And translators took this word, Hebrew word, who, and translated it to he. But in Hebrew, words mean many multitudes of things, not just one thing. And that's part of the midrash base of how to look at Scripture, is that, for example, the word eved means work, worship, serve, servant, slave. The same word. So, like, the biblical language is actually opening up conversation of not one interpretation or path. And so this word who is the same thing. Can it mean he? Yes. But it also means it. It also can be this gender not thing. Mm-hmm. And so I think when I really started learning Hebrew and reading Scripture in Hebrew and realizing how often Scripture referred to God in this way, and then really studying the fact that, like, we're made in God's image. And in Judaism, like, we believe that God is, like, I think in Christianity, we say that a lot, like, we're made in God's image, but do we really understand that, like, God is in us? We don't have to go out for God. We can go inward for God. And, like, God's in our breath. It's in our body. Like, we coexist. And so in Jewish culture, there's like this saying that if you don't know context of this, people can be offended. But really, we're all God here, meaning God is each and every one of us expression. I'm God, part of God, trinning in the world. And you are part of God, Alexing in the world. And you, Rory, are part of God, Rorying in the world. And all of that is beautiful. And it also causes us to think about how we're treating one another. Because to treat someone with disrespect is to disrespect the very living God.
Mm-hmm.
So like, there's just this like, do we realize the emphasis of being made in the image of the Almighty God, and in the God that has so many different names that are both from masculine traits, neither, breasted one, the Ruach, which is the Spirit of God, which is the womber, and how God shows up in different gender areas for people, and in neither, and in fullness and in beauty, and how all of that is actually needed in the journey of faith to encounter God. And so I find it sad that some translators were motivated to leave out the beauty of what we need in that aspect. So
Absolutely.
yeah, just some thoughts.
Yeah. Good thoughts. Absolutely.
Yeah. So how do we put that into our play? How do we use play to explore the fullness of what people can be and what people are, and what we can be and what we are? You've talked about it a little bit, each of you, talking about like using play to explore some things. You want to say a little more about those experiences?
I can. Well, I really explored gender a lot in gameplay, and I had the wonderful privilege of doing that with some really good friends. And I came to this, well, I've always known, I think you always know that you don't quite fit a gender. Growing up, I was always like told, you're not feminine enough. You're too masculine, Trin. When I was a pastor, somebody told me that I lead with a masculine air. And I went, what does that mean, please? Like,
It's like you put on some cologne,
Like-
little Axe body spray in the morning.
I don't know what that means. And it was disgusting what the response was. And
Sure.
it was a guy who told me this. And
Yeah.
and he goes, because you are so confident. And I was like, what?
Because a
So,
woman can't be confident?
confidence is synonymous with masculine? No. And like a lot as a younger person, I dressed in all sorts of different expressions of clothes, and but in my adult life, like I was always afraid to own it because I grew up in these faith spaces where it was very conservative, and you can only be boy or girl, and you can only definitely marry and be attracted to the opposite sex, right? So there was very boundaries. And when I was a pastor, it was like, oh no, I definitely can't like own. But I would have comments made to me all the time. You need to be more nurturing, Trin, as a female pastor. And I'm just like, whoa. So I think I didn't really like own my like non-binary gender fluidness until later in life, where I just got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore. It was like chipping away at my soul. And I was like, nope, I'm just going to be me. And I think in games, I just explored all the different types of like femininity, masculinity, when I didn't feel like either, in the game. And I would create characters and situations where I'd really explore gender. And even in the game, like I'd be like, oh, we're in this situation where we need a noble to go in, and and for some reason it needed to be a guy, and I was like, no problem, I'm not binary, I'll put on some guy clothes and I will go have these noble conversations. And it was just fun to like try on all of that and really like figure out like, no, this has always been me. And to be at a table with friends that are like, yeah, it's always been you. And that's the beauty of it. Like, we love Trin because Trin is Trin. And some of my guy friends were like, I love the fact that I have like a guy friend and a girlfriend and a everything friend. And I'm like, great, thanks. Yeah, that was just really pivotal for me in like owning it, because I think I owned my sexuality first because that was maybe easier for me to grasp. And then I decided to be like, yeah, this is my gender, guys. But it was a pivotal place for me to explore. Like, yeah, I do have this, definitely a masculine side of me. And one of my best friends is like, is agendered. And they gave me this really great synopsis of they are a beautiful human and they observe a lot of people and a lot of conversations. And this person would tell me, they'd say, hey, I watch you interact with people and I watch you sometimes present in different genders, and especially in your like more masculine side. And I watch people freak the out because they don't know. They're like looking at you and then you're like, this is coming at them. And I'm like, really? And they were like, yeah. And it's fun. And I'm like, okay. Doesn't feel great sometimes, but my friend was like, you do so well though, just being you. What you see is what you get. And being unapologetically yourself. Mm-hmm. And I was like, thanks. But it's just odd in gameplay, but in real life, hearing these reflections from my friends.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, some of us are a little more comfortable, like wearing our identities a little more outward. And sometimes, it's the game, playing a role-playing game where you play another character gives you an opportunity. I mean, even if you are that kind of a person, it still gives you an opportunity where there are parts of your identity that you're maybe not comfortable showing in your day-to-day, where you can play it because it's a character and there's enough distance that it's safe and it allows for that exploration.
Oh, absolutely. I think about each of the different characters that I've played. They have pieces of me in them, They're not me, but they are me at the same time. Characters who seem so different than how I do my everyday. But there's always nuggets of who I am or what I'm thinking about or something I'm wrestling with in there. And I definitely connect with a lot of what Trin said. When I was in college, I did a thesis on play and exploring in between spaces. I specifically did a look at the brony community, and my thesis was called Gender is Magic. And it was about how specifically the adult male fans of My Little Pony, ages 13 to 35, have created a liminal space of American masculinity that is outside of the box of standard masculinity. That's about art and friendship. And if you haven't seen the show, each one of they're kind of like the fruits of the spirit. Like each one of the ponies represent an element of friendship.
It's a really great show.
And so, it's very sweet. And like this community of oddballs and losers stamped that way from other people, but instead usually pretty neurodivergent people, very sweet, very kind, would really like to regulate themselves and other people and how they treat each other, come together around a shared language of a TV show and are saying like, yeah, I really identify with the element of kindness, so I really love Fluttershy or whatever it is. And it's a lot of art and a lot of meetups and dinners and movie watching and all kinds of incredible creativity. And just like any fandom, there's weird that happens, which is a part of any fandom. But like that was such a fun thing to get to be a part of and to explore, just like the fluidity of how identity, like gender and sexuality, personality, these are things that you create. So in that and in a lot of different fandoms, you create OCs, original characters, right? And maybe if you know anything about like furries and that, people will have like suits that they design. They're so elaborate and beautiful. And sometimes they're not even a specific animal. They're all these pieces of different animals. And that's on purpose because they're like, no, I really like wolf ears and I really like cat paws and I really like a horse face. And that's just me. And it's them, but it's not them at the same time. And I watch people who are super shy become super outgoing and so friendly, and they feel so comfortable because you have a sense of agency over how you look and how you present to people. And for me, as someone who always felt very different than how I appear, Getting to do character play with role-playing games has been so wonderful because you get to the joy of being fully yourself, and sometimes even more like a grand version of yourself with these characters that you play. Yeah, there's something really healing about it. There's something really fun about it. I often play as female characters when I play D&D. One, because they're often underrepresented at the table, and two, because women are fantastic, and I want every woman to be seen as this incredible, nuanced, powerful, intelligent, smart, strong creature that is worthy, and I don't think that there's a lot of space within at least American femininity for some of those nuances. So I love to play a lot of female characters and to give them that. I also have tried to play some like much more flamboyant kinds of characters than myself. Like I tried to play a bard for like 2 sessions. I tried like just, the classic I'm gonna seduce the dragon kind of bard. And I was like, I can't do it. I want to do it. I wanted to be this like bright pink tiefling that romanced everyone. I was like, I can't do it. But I had a chance to do it, right? I got to be like, oh, I'm exploring some of this gender and sexuality stuff. I'm going to be like real spicy. And it was panic. I didn't even have fun. And I was like, okay, that's worth trying. And something I love about D&D is it's just like a t-shirt, man. You try something on, and if you don't like it, you change it. And you just put on it. You get a different size, and you can get your favorite color and your favorite blorbos on there, and you can make it just the way you want. And gosh, that's healing and fun and playful. And I hope everybody takes the chance to play a character that is a lot like them and who's not a lot like them, and to do the realizing of stuff about yourself and realizing stuff about our neighbors too and our common ground.
Yeah. I mean, even when you try to play a character that's not like you, there is a way that you show up in it.
Absolutely.
Like as you play the game plan kind of plays you back. It's like, oh, you didn't think you were playing with yourself, but you are, and this is the part.
You are. You always are. Yes.
Like, I played this character in a campaign that Alex and I were in together, where I was running another game where I had made this character. Her name is Kitiara. She was one of the villains in this other campaign.
My wife.
I know, we got married.
So I loved getting D&D married to you.
I played this woman, Kitiara, who was a character from the Dragonlance like D&D books that I read as a kid and loved. But she was like this. She was an enemy. She was the love interest of the main character who I actually loved. And I had never liked her. I thought she was garbage. I thought I didn't like her. Why would you ever be interested in her? I didn't find her at all attractive. But I wanted to play her for this part of this campaign because her story was tied into one of the other villain stories, and so I decided to play her in this game where I was running as a player just to explore it. And I found out there's so much about Kitiara that is like me that
so
I can't.
Much
I
fun.
can't I found out as I was playing Kitiara, I found myself being very comfortable in her shoes because there was so much of her this lustiness to her, this bravado to her, this ambition to her. I'm like, oh, this is kind of me in some dark ways here. And it was a fun campaign, but I had never played in a game where romance was involved, but
and
Alex
she was
worthy.
worthy. Yeah, it was the very Catra Adora thing kind of going, and it was like the classic
Adora.
paladin and the bad girl, and it's like, but how cool that you started with a character that you didn't like, and then you grew to find your common ground with her, and then even more, just the sheer power that you brought into her being real. Made her a character that was so attractive and interesting and drawing people in, and she was always making a mess, right? Oh, Kitiara,
so
she already rushed into the fight. We didn't even get to talk about it, and then eventually that becomes a person who's just so central to your life. So, I mean, what a cool way for us to practice empathy with other human beings too, for our own identity and for identities that aren't like ours, and developing a love for those around us who are different than us.
Yeah.
It's nice to hear that other people get D&D married. Like,
yeah, have you been
like,
D&D married, Trin?
Yes, because one of my really good
I love
friends in our last camp, oh man, I'm running 2 campaigns at the same time right now, so it's like, yeah. But we were married, and we got like married in the campaign, and then there was like strengths because we were married. We got like certain like aptitudes because of our marriage. So like when we were in battle, if we're near each other, we have like extra strength, or like there's all these
I love this.
like, bonuses. And it's just funny because like the way the story unfolded, it was hilarious because in real life, she is my really good friend's wife, and we're all really good friends. But it's funny. But in the game, we're married. And it was just fun to explore all different things through this like really like weird married arrangement. But it was just, it's cool to hear that other people do that, because our games can get really like, we just kind of follow it. It's like, I'm always thinking like, what would be good for the story? What would be really interesting here? Let's just follow that. Like, let's see what happens, you know?
And when there's some safety built into it, right?
Yeah.
Like when there's it's such a consent thing, right? You play with people who are safe. And when you're done with the game, it's like watching a movie or reading a good book. You're like, wow, I cannot believe they did that. See you next week.
Yeah.
Like my spouse Nash was playing in the same game as Rory and I, and he was like, "This is great, I love it." And we're all going to Gen Con, and it'll be fabulous. But yeah, I mean, what a safe, sane, fun way to explore different parts of who you are with people you trust, and get to be these different characters.
Yeah, and I think, you talk about safety, and that is a really important part to being able to do this at your table.
Big time.
Is having the safe community of people, having the safety tools there, accessible if you need them, so that you can kind of explore your character a little more and feel safer, because exploring ourselves, it is something that's scary to do. We, sometimes we do it, we can kind of like intentionally do it, but sometimes it's pretty scary to do. The folks at Game to Grow, which is this great nonprofit that does therapeutically applied role-playing games, put out a book recently called Therapeutically Applied Role-Playing Games, where they look at 4 different ways that people play characters and how they kind of reflect themselves in those. So there's like a looking glass character that is very much like, I'm playing me in this game. And a lot of times maybe that's people that are playing their first character, or they're just getting to know the game, or you still have like it's a fantastic version of you, but it's really you. The second kind is an amplified self character, where it's like you, but maybe there's one attribute that's turned up to 11. And so some people are like, I really want to work on like talking to people, so I'm gonna dump all my points in charisma, play someone who's really charismatic, just really try and turn that one part of me up. Or maybe it's like, I'm a little bit impulsive, but I really want to see what life would be like if I was very impulsive, so I'm just going to take my impulsivity and dial it up. Then there's the aspirational character, where it is like, now I'm outside my comfort zone, but it's on purpose. There is something different than me that I want to try out, like you trying out that sexy hot pink tiefling, where you're like, I'm gonna do this and just see, and then you like figure out, maybe this was a good experience and I want some more of it. Maybe it wasn't a good experience, and now I've learned something about myself. And then there's the shadow character, where you don't even necessarily know that part of yourself that you're expressing in that, where you're, it's parts of yourself that you're uncomfortable expressing. It's those parts of yourself that you hide, even from your own understanding, but really are like aching to grow. And when you start playing, sometimes those show up in a game and you really like dive into it. And so there is this exploration of yourself that happens all sorts of ways around the table.
This is a super good resource, Rory. Are you gonna link it in the show notes?
I can, yeah. I will. I'll put a link up to that book. It's really great.
Sweet. I also want to put a link up to, since we've been talking so much about like gender and sexuality and stuff, it's not a perfect example, but an example of something that I've used a lot to teach people who are first learning about like the complexity of being a human being is the diagram of the genderbread person. Are either of you familiar?
No.
I think I've
It's
seen
like it's an old internet meme, and it's not perfect, but it like is about how all of these things are an expression. It's got identity, attraction, expression, sex, and it's all like in this cute little gingerbread person, and then each of them has a spectrum, and they're all separated out from each other, and they have like different locations anatomically. So it helps people to say like identity is not the same thing as attraction.
Oh, I've
It's
seen
not the
this.
same thing as expression. And it's just like I use this for like a hey, I'm trans coming out thing with my staff at church. Because it was very obvious, but we had some really awful transphobic interactions that happened from congregation members. And they were all really protective and loving of me. But they were like, but what are we protected? Like, who are you? They wanted to know me. So I was like, this is really cool. What a privilege. It's a neat resource, and I'll link it because you could think about it for character creation when you're creating your D&D characters, and also it's just kind of like a neat little learning tool. Like everything, it's not perfect. It's one of many tools.
They also use the gender unicorn now.
Yeah, yeah.
Which
yeah.
is really similar.
Similar.
But I think it's, yeah. But yeah, I've seen the gingerbread guy. That's great.
Well, Trin, you want to take us out?
Yeah. I just feel like it flew by.
Yeah,
And
it's been awesome.
But that is it for episode number 2 of the Roll for Joycast. Rory, where can people find you online?
So you can find my blog at rollforjoy.org. That's the number 4, Roll for Joy. I'm also on Threads and Instagram. I have abandoned Twitter X long ago. So that is no dice for me. And Trin, how about you? Where can people find you online?
Well, I have never been on Twitter. I think I tried to start one like way back in the day, but I just don't get into that. But I am not there, so you will not find me on X. But I actually have a website, seekhealgrow.com. And I'm a spiritual guide, and I also help people through religious trauma. I'm trained in brain spotting. It's a technique to deal with different types and process different types of trauma, because I'm in school to be a therapist, and and because of my background, I'm really passionate about that and providing space for people to process, rather it be through faith, religious trauma, because I think we've all incurred some of that at some point in time. But that's where you can find me online, is at seekhealgrow.com. And Alex, how about you?
Well, I don't do a ton online that you can find, but you can find me at velocipastor.alex. And that's for Instagram and Discord, and I also don't do X. But yeah, I try to be, I do a lot of playing in my games in Discord online, but those aren't usually open forums. But y'all can definitely send me an email or connect with me anywhere the Roll for Joy stuff is, because I'm helping out with part of the Holy Rollers retreat this year and with that team. So if you look for Rory, you should be able to find me.
Yeah, we're so lucky to have you on board. Alex is going to be
I'm so
one
excited.
of the dungeon masters for our Holy Rollers retreat this year, and so excited to have them as part of the mix. It's going to be a great addition to the team.
Looking forward to it.
So I just want to remind everybody to journey together
And to find the fun.
And hold on to hope. We'll see you next
All right.
time.
Thanks, guys.